What's up, guys? The unthinkable has happened. The Washington Capitals seem to be sellers at the 2023 trade deadline. So, as you can see, full three-way trade details. Boston acquires left-handed defenseman Dmitry Orlov. They get a right winger in Garnet Hathaway. Washington receives Craig Smith, a guy that was placed on waivers at the beginning of the season, a guy that they've been wanting to move for the longest time due to his contract. Then you have a 2023 first round pick, 2025 second round pick, a 2024 third round pick, and Caps retention of 50% of the Orlov contract. Minnesota, once again, playing third fiddle. They get Andrei Svetlakov. I think I pronounced his name right. Luca, don't make fun of me. 2023 fifth round pick, and the Wild retain 25% of the Orlov contract. So, Luca, what are your thoughts on this deal? Why didn't they acquire Vladislav Gavrikov? What happened there? Did the deal fall apart? They were linked to him for the longest time. It seems like they had a trade in place because he has been scratched for trade-related reasons, which is the worst terminology in the NHL at the moment, and I hate that word because it's like a trade like done already. I'm tired of waiting. So, yeah, let's hear your thoughts on it, Luca.
Well, I mean, listen, to be honest, I don't really know the whole situation with Gavrikov in Boston. The one thing I do know is that the Bruins did have a deal in place with Columbus. The problem is that they needed to move cap space out, and unfortunately, it looked like Columbus didn't want to take Craig Smith in the deal, so it became a little bit more complicated. But I like this deal for Boston. I think this one makes more sense than Gavrikov. Not only that, but look, they're getting a really good defenseman in Dmitry Orlov. I really like him. I think he's a good top four defenseman. I think he makes the Bruins better in their decor. 100%. And then they get Garnet Hathaway, who, to be honest, he plays like a Boston Bruin. He's a fourth line tough guy, who's very good defensively. Can hit. He's a big body. I think he's 6'3", 6'4". So a big body for sure in Boston. And you know what? Like, that's a really good move. And I think it goes to show you that Washington right now is trying to, I think they've kind of called it quits on the season. They lost Ovechkin for a little while due to what happened with his father. And I think ever since then, they kind of just, I guess, gave up on the year. They decided that they're going to, be sellers this year. And so they moved on from Orlov and Hathaway. And look, they acquired Craig Smith, who, listen, you know what? He's a contract at the end of the day. I don't think he's a bad player. I think he's gonna play for Washington. I don't really see an issue there. They got a first round pick, a second round pick, and a third round pick, which is absolutely fantastic. I know the first round pick is going to be late, but listen, it's still a first round pick at the end of the day. A second and a third, which is nice. And for Minnesota, I mean, look, Minnesota is a team that is looking to gain some salary. And they've done a good job. They were there in the Leafs trade. They acquired a fourth round pick in the Ryan O'Reilly deal. They've acquired a fifth round pick in this deal, as well as forward Andrei Svetlakov as well. So interesting move, I think, for the Minnesota Wild. They get a prospect and they get a fifth round pick. They've moved on from some guys as well. The Wild have retained 25% of Orlov's contract, which I think helps out if you're the Bruins. And I think for the Bruins, I mean, they're kind of out on Gavrikov now. I think I don't see them continuing to be there. And I think for Washington, it's not really something that I think anyone expected. They talked about Orlov and Hathaway potentially being traded, the last couple of days, but I didn't know how much truth there was to that. And it seems like a deal, ended up rather quickly for Washington. They ended up getting, I guess, what they wanted. And it's a good move. But I don't know about the Bruins. I just want to answer Soccer Insider's question here because he brought it up. He says this makes the Bruins able to trade for Gavrikov from the Galactics by getting rid of Craig Smith's contract. It seems. I mean, maybe, but the thing is that I don't know. Is Boston acquiring Orlov? Does that change the stance on Gavrikov, or are they still going to go in on Gavrikov? That I'm not 100% sure. I know that there was a rumor first round pick involved. That's already been traded to Washington, so I don't know where the deal falls into place if you're Boston for Gavrikov, but I think it's a good move. And for me, I think automatically the Bruins become Cup favorites. They're already really good. They've added two really good players to their team. I don't see how Boston doesn't go all the way to the cup with this move, in my opinion. I really don't.
Let's take a look at the Boston Bruins forward core and also their defense core. So where does Hathaway essentially fit on this team?
He's gonna probably play fourth line minutes or third line minutes. If you go look where Craig Smith was, he was on the third line with Charlie Coyle and Taylor Hall. I could see him potentially slotting in there. There is also a possibility that he may end up on the fourth line. They move Nick Foligno up, but I do think that Garnet Hathaway might take the role of Craig Smith in Boston and essentially play on that third line. But if you look at the top nine, I mean, that's a really good top nine. And then adding Hathaway and getting rid of Smith, I think that makes the Bruins even scarier in the top nine, to be honest.
And looking at their D core, where does Orlov fit?
So this becomes very interesting. So Orlov, in my opinion, is the top four defenseman. However, if you look at their D-core Boston, it's already really good, right? Matt Grzelcyk, Charlie McAvoy, Brandon Carlo, Hampus Lindholm, Derek Forbort, and Connor Clifton. It's going to be tough to see where Orlov ends up. I think he probably ends up as a right defenseman on that line with Hampus Lindholm, and I think they bring down Brandon Carlo, and then they rotate between Connor Clifton and Derek Forbort. But I don't see him playing top 6 minutes. I think he's going to play top 4 minutes. I probably put him next to either Charlie McAvoy or Hampus Lindholm. I think he ends up playing with Lindholm. But like I said, I think they bring Carlo down one. But they can pretty much do whatever they want. The Bruins are stacked. Like, they're actually stacked. And, like, it's not normal. But, like,
And, in terms of Orlov, a defenseman with offensive upside, but at the same time, a player that has, been recognized for being a hitting machine. He's a big body, Russian made, as they say, right? So
yeah.
that's a guy that I do believe will make the Bruins even more grittier and bigger and badder and stronger. So any synonym to basically categorize the Boston Bruins as a heavy hitting, big, bulky team that scores a lot of goals, it seems like they're buying into that system once again, that they're the big bad Bruins, and Orlov just adds to that, and also
Hathaway,
acquiring
too.
Hathaway as well too. So that's awesome in terms of their end. In terms of the Capitals, where does Craig Smith fit on this line up?
I mean, third line, fourth. Like, I mean, look. Honestly, look at Washington's team. Okay, their top nine is decent. Like, it's decent. It's not terrible. It's and that's without Hathaway in it as well, right? I think he probably takes up Obey Kubel's job on the fourth line. I don't really know what their plan is for Craig Smith. He was just a contract dump, I think. But probably on the fourth line. If Washington's looking to trade Lars Eller, he probably goes there. But he has an opportunity of potentially moving up in the lineup as well. Maybe he'll play on the second line with instead of Connor Sheary. I don't really know where the plan is for Washington and what Laviolette wants to do, but I think he probably takes, let's say, Nick Obey-Kubel's job or potentially even Connor Sheary's job and brings Connor Sheary down, but I'm not 100% sure.
And let's just take a look at the stats of Dmitry Orlov. So Dmitry Orlov, 31 years old, born in Russia, second round pick by the Washington Capitals in 2009. Looking at his stats here, he's a 20 to 35 point defenseman, especially for a defensive minded defenseman. He has some really good offensive upside. So this year in 43 points, 43 games, 19 points, 3 goals, 16 assists. Last year, career high of 35 points in 76 games, 12 assists, 12 goals and 23 assists. And this is a guy that brings championship pedigree because he did win the Stanley Cup with the Washington Capitals, a guy that's been in the playoffs for many years, ups and highs of the Washington Capitals. So this is a guy that knows what it takes to essentially win a Stanley Cup.
Yeah, and I mean, look, he won a cup with the Capitals back in 2018, I believe. So there was definitely an opportunity there for him. And I think for Hathaway, I mean, look, he's a playoff type player, and not only that, but he's exactly what the Bruins need. If you look at the Bruins, and we've always talked about the Bruins for a long time, they're the big bad Bruins, right? That's always what they've been. That's their reputation. And Garnet Hathaway has done a lot of good things in terms of being that physical force, but being very good defensively as well. right? He's a little bit like a B-Tech Tom Wilson, essentially, right? Not as good, not as skilled, but can throw the body, can play defense, can score when he needs to. And I think that he's going to be a big part of the Bruins. I think for Orlov, like, look, obviously offensively, this isn't. He's not going to be an offensive defenseman. He's not going to score you 50 points, but he's a guy who's very good defensively and in his own end. He'll get you the occasional points here or there. And like you said, he hits. But not only does Orlov hit, he doesn't take that many penalties either. Go look at his career, right? The guy doesn't take that many penalties. He's averaged 279 penalty minutes in 688 NHL games. That's not bad, right? That's about a penalty maybe every second game or third game. So that's not horrible. And I think that if you're the Bruins, that's a big factor that goes into it as well, because you're not gonna have he's reliable in the sense that you don't have to worry about him taking penalties. But not only that, he's good defensively as well. So the Bruins get two really good defensively minded players here for essentially a late first round pick, which is essentially a second. Craig Smith, who, let's be honest, the Bruins have been trying to trade him since last year, right? A second and a third, which can be pretty much anything. And then they go to Minnesota, trade a fifth round pick and a prospect, let's say. Like, this is a fantastic move for the Bruins. I have absolutely zero complaints about this for the Bruins. I think they've absolutely got a home run here with this move. I think Washington did well too. Look, they got 3 draft picks and a player. I think Washington did well too, but in my opinion, Boston wins this deal by a long shot. By a long shot. And I'm not going to call it a steal yet, but in my opinion, and it depends on if Orlov's a pure rental. If he's a pure rental, then it changes things. But if they end up signing him, that's an even bigger steal, which I don't think they will because they don't have the cap space. But
Yeah, and not only that, but Dmitry Orlov wanted a 6-year deal with the Washington Capitals. Unfortunately, the Capitals only offered him a 3-year extension. He did not like that. They said, "Okay, fine, we're gonna move you then," and that's
yeah,
exactly what happened. In terms of Garnet Hathaway, what he's done, third line, fourth line, player. 16 points in 59 games this season, a career high last year with the Capitals, 26 points in 76 games, 14 goals and 12 assists. Career total, 432 games played, and in terms of points, 116 points, 54 goals, 62 assists. Don't expect him to be this guy that's gonna be a guy who scores like 20, 30 goals in a season. This guy is literally built for the playoffs. He's going to be a guy that's going to be getting gritty goals, essentially, going towards the net, scoring a tip in, for example, or, shoving at the goalie in front of his face and causing a goal for the Boston Bruins. He's basically a grinder, in my opinion, with some offensive upside. And in terms of Craig Smith, he had a good start with the Boston Bruins, but after that, declined immensely, in my opinion. He was playing with Bergeron, Marchand on the first line the first season he joined the Boston Bruins, and then look at him now, placed on waivers at one point this season, then traded to the Washington Capitals. But he was fairly good with the Nashville Predators, career high in his first season. 52 points in 79 games with Nashville Predators in 2013, 2014. He was known to be a 20-goal scorer, not anymore, unfortunately. And he has 14 points in 42 games this season, 4 goals and 6 assists. And 10 points. Oh my God. 14 penalty minutes. Yeah, penalty minutes. I don't know what's going on with me today. It's probably all those videos I did yesterday. 831 games played, 195 goals, 213 assists for a total of 408 points. Not too shabby. Drafted in the 4th round by the Nashville Predators in 2009, the same year that Orlov got drafted in 2009. He's 33 years old. And it's funny how, a couple of 30-year-olds got traded in the same deal. Usually you're expecting a lot more younger players. But, I mean, in this case, Boston wanted to add grit and playoff experience. And that's exactly what they do. They live up to the big bad Bruins reputation that I was alluding to at the start of the video. In
yeah,
terms of Craig Smith and what he could do with the Washington Capitals, they're fighting for a playoff spot, but I think they're throwing in the towel and they're like, you know what, let's just liquidate some pieces. I wouldn't be surprised if Lars Eller is the next piece to be traded.
Yeah, me neither. I wouldn't be surprised. I also wouldn't be surprised if potentially even TJ Oshie gets traded as well. He could be a guy that potentially could be on the move. I know I haven't heard much about him, but he's a guy that I believe doesn't have that much left on his contract in terms of years. I think he's a guy that maybe if Washington looks at, they can move him as well. But I mean, listen, I was surprised that Orlov got moved. I was surprised that teams were talking about it. I didn't think Washington was actually going to go ahead and pull the trigger on a deal. Looks like they have. And I think they get a decent haul out of it. And as for Boston, like I said, they're getting a top four defenseman who's very good defensively, and they're getting Garnet Hathaway, who's very good defensively and a big body. Jim Montgomery has done a very good job with the Bruins this season in terms of how he's played and how the Bruins have played, and I think they just made their team better, and John Sweeney's made um, um, Montgomery's life better by being able to add two more pieces in Orlov and Hathaway. I
And
really
what
like
can
this move for the Bruins, and
so do
I
I.
don't really know what else to say, to be honest, other than the fact
What
that
can you say about that other piece that was included, the young player?
I mean, he's 26 years old. He's playing in the KHL, never really turned out into anything. He's a guy that, to be honest, was drafted by the Bruins in the 6th round in 2017. Has been a KHL player his whole life. I don't think he makes it in the NHL. I don't think he ends up playing in the NHL. This season in the KHL, playing for CSK Moscow, 66 games played, 11 goals, 16 assists, 27 points. Last year in 28 games, had 3 goals, 4 assists. He had 7 points. He had 9 points in the playoffs. So it doesn't looks like he's a decent KHL player in the sense that he's probably a good third line guy. But like I said, I don't think he ends up playing in the NHL. I think he's just an added piece. But
Yeah.
I mean, there must have been something that Minnesota or Washington liked about him that they ended up,
Yeah. And
acquiring
just a
him. But
couple of details in terms of Craig Smith, what Jay Fresh said, is not the analytics goat he once was, but can still be a useful depth player. Orlov has been one of the NHL's most effective fourth line
yeah,
defensive wingers for the past several seasons. Sorry, that's Hathaway, my bad. In terms of Orlov, a two-way puck moving defenseman who can more than hold his own in a top pairing minute role. And also, he says, do not sleep on Orlov offensively or in transition. Really is one of the most prolific and effective movers out
yeah,
there. So, guys, that's
definitely.
a wrap on our trade breakdown for Orlov and Hathaway heading to the Boston Bruins and Craig Smith plus heading to the Washington Capitals. We'd like to say thank you so much for tuning in. Don't forget to like our video, subscribe to our channel if you haven't already, and we'll see you on the next episode of the Young Guns podcast. And also make sure to comment what you're feeling about this trade. Who won, the Boston Bruins or the Washington Capitals?